Michael and his two angels.
Yes, there you go. Well, that's how we started because that just got caught on the live, Deb. So we're good. There you go, Debs. You hit it. We're, you're both glowing, so we're good. And I'm just shiny because it's 182 degrees here. So
where are you now, Michael? I mean, it's great to see you, but where are you now? Because I know you were moving last time I spoke to you.
no, I'm still in Arkansas. Wasn't able to move.
Okay.
Still stranded. Still stranded. Maybe ends in August, hopefully.
Yeah.
Have you got any air conditioning, Michael?
Well, I have air conditioning that doesn't shut off and doesn't get anywhere near the temperature that it's set at. Yes.
I know
It's
how
a
it
cabin.
is.
It's a cabin. There's no insulation. It's a high roof. It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's like a sauna.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. And the fan moves the hot air around, so it's great. It's very enjoyable for everyone involved.
Yeah, you. Well, it's great to be here and see everyone. It's been a while. It has.
It has. It's been too long. I took that hiatus from doing live shows for a while because I burnt myself out and I had too much going on in my life and I physically burnt myself out. Like my thyroid started shutting down and like it wasn't a typical burnout. It was more like Deb's where it just crushed me. Oh, look, here comes the computer's vibrating. We're getting good now. Here it goes. We're kicking the rattle in. We'll hear nobody soon. So
were you able to take a step back then when you were feeling, okay, these symptoms are coming up. I can see what this is. I recognize it. Yes.
I didn't have a choice. It was forced upon me. I spent 3 days in a row in the fetal position, laying on the ground, basically crying all day because I was in so much pain. My whole body was inflamed. They started testing me for MS and other things because they didn't know what it was. And really what it came down to, it was just a really bad thyroid storm that just kicked the living shit out of me. Like my body just fought against itself. And I was spiritually burnt out. I was emotionally burnt out. I was physically burnt out. The good news is now I'm just emotionally burnt out. So we're good. We're making progress. See, this is progress. This is growth. So I'm holding space for myself and healing.
And growth is not linear, right?
No. It's more like a zigzag or a crossword puzzle or
It's a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster.
Yes. It's like my heart rate, extremely erratic.
And when you said, Michael, with your thyroid issues and everything, how are you doing just on foundational habits like food, consuming nutrition into your body, sleep?
I'm finally getting back to where I should be. It took me 3 months, but I'm finally getting back where I should be.
Yeah.
I put on, out of the 45 pounds I lost, I put on 20 to 25 of them back. So now I'm starting to reverse that and go back down again. My body's starting to operate normal again. I'm sleeping that solid 5.5 to 7 hours a night, usually, depending on my 4-year-old, because that's again out of my control, right? So the 4-year-old, there's a lot of times that I get thrown out of a king size bed by a mini 4-year-old and pushed onto a couch, which then I finish the rest of my night. But it is solid sleep. I mean, it's good sleep. Yeah. It's not light sleep, which is nice for a change.
That makes a huge difference in your day, right?
Oh, it's an enormous difference. Yeah, I mean, it's an enormous difference. And it's been interesting, right? Like my mind, the fogginess is gone again, because when you have thyroid issues, like you get this brain fog, and it brings you to like this cloudiness where you can't focus. It made my ADHD so bad that I couldn't grab a single thought, and physically I felt better about a month and a half ago, and then over the last month I went through this big emotional crash from it. So it's like, even though I felt better, like I went through this huge off a cliff, started losing my habits and patterns and routines that I focus on so dearly. And it really took me away from myself. And then this last week, I've really been getting back to my accountability and really holding myself to a strict regimen.
That's good. Good. And good to hear that.
I don't have mountains to ski on like Deborah does. Or roll down.
But
No, but it is. I mean, sorry, go on, Deborah.
no, I was just saying, Michael. It's just I just see so much courage when you share that. So much courage.
Oh.
Because you're like you're just saying it just as it is, and you've released, you're releasing it and enabling it to take. You've enabled it to take its course, and that's the huge piece, in my humble opinion, around healing and true healing, like integral healing. It's not just like phase and then move. You know what I mean? It's like I can really see. Honestly, I honestly see so much courage coming from you. Yeah.
I mean, for me, my overarching core value is truth, right? Living in my truth, which also means that I need to be transparent and honest with myself, which is always the hardest part. And then I can reflect it outward. And, I mean, this past week, I posted about, almost drinking on my 15-year sober anniversary, right? So it's like, because I just hit this wall. And I didn't even notice how bad the wall was until I almost said yes to a drink. And the ironic part is, it's not even something that I even think about anymore. But I hit that point where I wasn't even aware at all of how bad of a space I was in. And I actually considered yes to the drink. Now, granted, I did say no. I didn't take it. And it was like, and then I beat myself up and shamed myself for it for a few days. And then I posted about it, and then I felt better, right? So for me, my releasing is telling the world. And I don't carry the shame anymore, right? There's no shame in almost saying yes. And truthfully is, even if I would have relapsed, there's no shame in that either, right?
No.
The shame is when you don't admit it to yourself and you don't want to heal again. I was fortunate enough to catch myself before I said yes, and I was able to address those issues so that hopefully going forward, next time there's not a hesitation. Because in 15 years, as much as I've been through being homeless, losing my everything, not seeing my kids for 18 months, having a diabolical soon-to-be ex-wife, everything that I went through, I never wanted to touch a drink. But being here in isolation for all this time, doing all this healing work and getting to such a deep-rooted problem from my deep childhood, now it kind of came to the surface, and, I'm very fortunate. I really am fortunate because I think there's other periods of time in my life that I probably would have said yes. And this time I was fortunate enough not to. And I'm aware that all we have is today when it comes to that.
So what happened, Mike? I'm really curious if I can ask you this, because I think with everyone, going through, and this year that we've been through, and even if you have previously drinking, or with your sobriety, or wherever it is, what was that moment, I'm curious, to where you were almost there, and then the other split second or moment that then catched you? Because those are really big things when it comes to that decision, because it can go like that.
So for looking back, right, because hindsight's 2020, and at the time I just didn't see it. What I realized at that moment when I hesitated, it was definitely because I lost my self-awareness. Completely lost my self-awareness in all and everything that I'm building, everything I'm working on, building this breath framework, working with people around the world, helping others is what keeps me going. And I really went heads down over the last 4 months of just building, and not really speaking to many people. So not only am I physically isolated, but then I started cutting myself off that way. And doing live shows is a big out for me also, because I love the energy of it and I love the expression. And that's my release. And I wasn't doing that as much either. So it came down to a multitude of things that all led to that point. What stopped me was truly because knowing that I've spent 16 months here fighting for custody of my kids, and that first sip would have led to the downfall of everything around it. Could I have stopped at the one drink? Maybe this time I could have. 15 years later, maybe. Who knows? But it's not worth taking that first drink, not knowing where it's going to lead me after my history and everything that I get addicted to. I also fell into my other escapisms also, which I have no shame in, right? Like I started going back to porn. I started thinking about gambling. I started looking at my escapisms, right? And when I started looking at when I caught myself that day, I really realized what I did. That I started dipping into those to numb everything, right? Because, you know, after bouncing back physically from that burnout feeling to then getting to this point where everything is building, everything's going great, I feel like I'm on top of the world, to then having this emotional just breakdown almost and just hitting this wall. It really put me in a position where I could have collapsed upon everything, but I didn't. And I'm very fortunate. That's only by my higher power, by God, by source, by whatever the universe, whatever you want to call it, whatever my purpose is here is too big for it to allow me to fail. Because there's no way I did that on my own. I mean, there's just not. I wasn't in a place to do it. I just know I wasn't. And I really don't know how to express other than don't isolate yourself. It's bad enough what everybody went through with COVID, but I'm truly isolated. Like, I haven't seen a person I've wanted to be around in 16 months. Like, I'm here by myself, 3 kids, fighting every day, dealing with them, healing, going through my healing journey, doing this enormous transformation on all levels. And then I'm also helping my children heal from what they went through and dealing with the fights, the trauma, everything that comes with it. And it's just a lot, right? It's a lot. And I almost slipped, but I didn't, thank God. I just didn't.
Yeah. I think that's amazing to hear, just you sharing that and really taking us back to that vulnerable moment, because I feel you. I feel you on that. And I think it can happen so easily. And just like you're saying, taking the necessary steps or looking at that awareness and trying not to go down the hole of shame and guilt, everything after, when you realize, oh, that was a close one.
Yeah. And it's a lot. I mean, it's because my instinct, because of how I was raised, because of what I went through in my life, because of my life and experiences, it's so easy to fall back into that blame, shame, and guilt. And in that way, I'm fortunate I'm not around some of the old dynamics that I used to be in, right? Before this healing journey. As much as I want to be around people, I don't want to be around certain people that I was used to be. So, and unfortunately, some of them are family, but it's life, and that's okay.
But also, Mike, I think also, what you're describing here is, whilst you say you're sort of dipping down and back up again, and we sort of described it as a roller coaster, what I do see, at least with you and with myself and Rebecca, I'd love to hear your story as well, which is it's this connection with yourself. And so you have a self relationship now that you didn't have before. And you're building on that. And the fact that you didn't take that drink, that one drink that you could have, at that time, I mean, I know the feeling when all of a sudden you just, you could go for double scotch because you just to numb yourself for a bit, right? And the fact that you didn't take that is such a testimony of your self-love. And I see the relationship with self as linear, actually. And obviously, it's a choice every single day, and every single moment of every single day that's true, and we can dip down and back up again. But just you telling a story for the first 10 minutes, it's just testimony that although you feel that you've just gone one step forward and 10 steps back, or in terms of your relationship with yourself, that keeps growing and you keep building on it.
And truthfully, right, I think that losing the self-awareness is losing self, right? So what I realized looking back is I lost self. I lost self in business. I lost self in porn. I lost self in all the numbing things that I've always gone to. And I have to be careful because workaholic is part of it, right? Because that's another numbing thing for me.
Another one,
I'm going to go into and bury myself into building business because, it has rewards. There's you get accolades for doing stuff like that, right? And there's an enormous return on every level from it, but it's so dangerous, right? And that's where the balance needs to come in, and that's something that I'm not good at, that I work on daily. And the only way I can do that is by really being very vigilant with time blocks in my life, and really being vigilant, not as far as time blocks, I'm going to do this, this, and this, but time blocks, I'm going to do nothing. I need that time to do absolutely nothing but sit with self.
That's
and I don't care
in itself.
Huh?
That's a skill in itself.
It is. And, you know, even if it's playing solitaire on my phone for an hour, right? Which is what I've been doing a lot lately because it's a healthier outlet for me. It's not money, it's free. It gives my brain occupied and I sit in my space by myself. You know, it allows my ADHD to run wild with solitaire while I'm just sitting with self and allowing myself to feel. It's not numbing me at all, right? Because there's nothing coming out of it because I'm not an overly competitive person. I don't believe in competition. It's just I don't, which is probably why I never excelled at or continued to excel at sports once I hurt my leg. But growing forward, I've realized that, you know, I've had to find healthier, you know, ways to have outlets. And that's been one of them for me. It's just, it gets me to do nothing and sit with self.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's finding, it really is finding those things that work for you and will only work for you as we are unique individuals. I mean, it's all of these with the self-care, with self-love, connection to ourselves. And the deeper we have that connection, the more we can check in with ourselves. I mean, like you're saying, Michael, daily. And for me, it's several times a day. I'm sure it is with you, Deborah, as well. Like we have a deep self-awareness where I know if something is off or I'm not feeling that flow or that energy, I know if I need to go out in the forest and take a walk, or if I actually need to just go sit by the water with a cup of coffee. You know, whatever that is. Yeah.
And and to add to that, Rebecca, I think also like when we hit the burnout wall and we recover from it, we have a much greater sense of self. Like, we are so aware. I feel that I've just got these antennae.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And in fact, I found it very difficult, you know, during recovery, to self-manage because I was so perceptive with other people's energy, and I had to continuously sort of self-adjust. And so if I felt, you know, I could feel a slight, if there was anyone, you know, who I was interacting with who was perhaps, you know, showing a bit of frustration or a bit of anger or a bit of, you know, stress or worry, I could feel it, and I probably felt it in a very magnified way. And there may be times where I had to look down. I couldn't look at the person, you know, in the eyes because I was trying to, you know, just how do you say, just recenter. And I'm massively into energy, like preserving our energy and our energy frequency on a daily basis now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's exactly with that, like you're saying. I mean, our energy and being very, let's say, sensitive with that. I'm not going to say, you know, highly sensitive person, but there is absolutely that. But I think really with energy and looking what we've been through to coming out the other side, those are just heightened. Like the senses, everything is just heightened. So I need to, you know, I need to also check within myself that, like you're saying, if we're in a crowd or speaking with people, it doesn't actually matter if it's over Zoom or if it's in person, we can still feel that. We are still, you know, human beings. And it's really okay, where can I protect this myself, but also holding a safe space for this person when they are sharing and when they are, you know, within their energy.
Yeah. And it goes back to the relationship with ourselves, isn't it? Because we don't even have a choice. I feel that I can only speak for myself, but and I'd love to hear what your take is on it. But I feel so I have to do things first for me. So if
Yeah.
I'm feeling off, like previously, I would still stick around. I would still hold it out. Do you know what I mean? Whereas today, I just I don't even want to go anywhere. If I step into that zone, I step right out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll just walk away. I don't have to. And on the contrary, I'm not looking at all into confronting or justifying myself or the other person. I just like step away.
Mm.
And that is, I find it really positive because it's really we're teaching ourselves to build
Yeah.
a healthier life environment with the people
Mm.
around us, the people we choose to be with, and the things that we choose to invest our time in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even with the last year and a half that we've all been through, you know, we've all been in the same boat. And I think that has been something huge for many, many. Speaking of, I think, Michael, we spoke about this like 9 months ago of when we were first kind of in the midst of thing, or the first 6 months of people are starting to really reflect. And I know I did a small little study in, it was November, December, of leaders within different industries, and really what has been going on from them from working from home. And the number one thing that kept coming up, like out of 6 out of 10 people that I interviewed, almost 150, was I've actually had time to be still now, time to reflect, time to be home, and I'm actually pausing to see what really matters in my life. Like the bigger questions were coming up. This is really what's important for me. Like the core values, the I think life situations with everything crazy and everything very sad, and with the grief of all that has gone on this year, there's actually been, you know, another blessing in disguise where I think it's awakened many of where they see, oh, do you know what? This is what matters in my life. This is, health comes first. It's family for me. Or if it's other, a few top three things.
It's like as if the pandemic has taken us into our own bubble,
Mm.
and we've had to sit and not with our own selves.
Yeah, yeah.
That we have never actually done probably for decades.
No,
And
yes,
just
yeah.
sitting with ourselves longer and longer and longer, and actually no longer having those distractions of,
Mm.
commuting to work, going to the bar after work, all the rest, all the activities, at work and outside of work,
Mm.
and just going back to the distractions, because we've had a lot less of those. We have had to sit still,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
being on the naughty step. And you're going to sit there,
Yeah.
you're going to sit with yourself,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
let's see what comes of it. And yeah, like you say, I think there's a lot
Oh,
of people who've oh,
Sorry, there was a lot of feedback on my side. I apologize. I
that's
had
okay.
I had to disconnect my mouse to connect my phone um to StreamYard to post comment. Never mind. Okay, so my ADHD is kicking in. I feel like sitting with self
Mm.
has become so complicated for everyone, and it is this situation that nobody was prepared for, right?
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
think anybody understands what they were in for going into 2020. Obviously, with COVID,
Mm.
maybe there was some signs at the end of 19 what was going to happen with, some type of health pandemic. Now,
mm,
I'm not getting into the political backwash and all the crap that's there, but that's fine.
Mm.
Um, the reality is, humanity was not ready to be put on pause.
No.
And when humanity got put on pause, it left almost 8 billion people sitting around with self, with nowhere to go because everything's closed, not able to leave the house. And not only that, you're stuck with the people that you live with. And even if you're married to them and they're your children, you probably still don't know them because you're never home.
Yeah.
And it became this process of, holy shit, what am I stuck in? Am I stuck in a bad relationship? Do I even know my children? What is wrong with me? Where did I fail? And all this self-doubt and fears and insecurities and overwhelmed feelings that we couldn't shake, we then became stuck with. For me, it was the opposite because I spent my whole life hiding in crowds. I spent my whole life running from self and never being home with self and not having access to my children for the previous 18 months before I got them. So then I got stuck with my children coming out of their circumstance, and it became this almost holy ground for me to work on self. I took it head on because I was just tired of not doing it anymore. And yes, meeting Annie and having her introduce me to many things and helping me find the Nate Brown books and guiding me down that path was an enormous motivator, right? And that's how we created the breath framework, which is parallel to our journeys, which is amazing in itself, but it's still evolving, right? Like the journey's not over. Like once you start healing, you spend the rest of your life healing. And it's this never ending process. And, like me and Debs have conversations, regularly, randomly, whatever you want to call it. And one day I'm having a bad day. One day she's having a bad day. It's been this crazy journey, right? And some days you feel like you are king of the world. You're ready to take on anything. And then some days you wish that the world would collapse on your shoulders and you could be buried under the whole damn thing. Because it is so much pressure at times. Because our old outlets don't exist anymore. We're not the same people we used to be. And we try to force ourselves into those outlets because that's what we used to do.
And those outlets were our reference points. But because we sat on the naughty step and sat with ourselves for so long, they've either disappeared or they've become irrelevant. And actually, even the relationships that we've had for so many years with friends, for instance, and then all of a sudden you're like, actually, I don't really appreciate you half as much as I thought I did. Do you know what I mean? Because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been tolerating this crap for so long. Or or I can't believe that I've just been accepting that I see this person or speak to this person on these dates when it suits them or whatever it is. And then so you're like, oh, wait a minute, clean slate.
Yeah, and
all of that.
And that's huge, right? Like that's huge because it's a situation. I thought I had a touch screen, but apparently not. Sorry, guys, no comments will be on the screen. I can explain that in a whole essay later. But yeah, like the dynamics are so different now. Because now that you have self, you realize what you won't take less than. And it is the most beautiful thing in the world. But then you have people that have been in your life for 20, 30 years that don't have a place anymore. And you've been loyal friends and you've been friends that interact in healthy ways where you thought, but because we've evolved, taken this time to evolve, these friendships don't fit in our life anymore because they bring us down.
They are disservice to us.
And it's exactly that. I had to go. I mean, it's actually even before, and I say I had to go through it, but I'm very glad I did because I realized this was it was a whole shift for me coming out of my burnout and really bringing awareness to what is going on in my life? Who am I surrounding myself with? How are those, situations, environments, relationships, energies, everything?
Mm.
And that's one of the hardest things I had to do was friendships of 20, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's
And
still, it's not a case of, if they would call me at 1 o'clock in the morning and something was wrong, I'm still going to be there for them. But I knew that there and then, in my own journey and my own growth, that they are not going to be a part of my day-to-day life in where I'm going and where I'm heading. And that was difficult, but it was necessary, and I wouldn't change it for the world today, because it also opened up a whole nother space and all new relationships and growth and meeting, those that are supposed to come into my life and on my path.
yeah,
But
and I feel very much what you're saying, Rebecca, because um in these past 2 years I've released one friendship of 20 years
Yeah.
and one friendship of 10 years. And do you
Mm.
know what? Like, for me, it was like I found it. It was like facing that decision was like staring at me in the face, going, "So what are you going to do about it, huh? What are you going to do about
Yeah.
it? Do you want to go on the self-love path, or you want to just keep going the way you've always gone?"
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
like, oh shoot, I've got to make a decision. So
Mm.
that was the hard bit. But I personally, on both occasions, when I made that decision, I felt such a release.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was,
Yes.
I felt such a liberation, which came out of like nowhere, and I'm like, well, hang on a minute, this person meant so much to me for 20 years, and now I've made this hard decision, and it's like, oof,
Mm.
because all of a
Yeah.
sudden you realise the space that you
Mm.
give to each friendship,
Yeah.
especially when it's a close friendship, and all of a sudden that space is given back to you, and you're like,
Mm.
yay, I've got that
Yeah.
space, I can do what I
Yeah.
want with it.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah.
but it's not only that, right? Part of it is certain. Okay, so here's the way that I look at this. When I start pulling away from people, right, intentionally, not unintentionally or not intentionally or whatever it is, whatever. My grammar's horrible. So, well, my master of the English language is still, working, a work in progress. I'm great with American English for what that's worth globally. So, when I really look at this, how can I expect myself to be in higher vibrations
Mm.
if I'm willing to lower my vibration to fit into a dynamic that doesn't fit who I am anymore?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There you
And
go.
I have days that I'm extremely lonely. I have days that, I wish I could hug a human being, right? I
Mm.
want to be around people that matter to me. But then I also realize that the people that used to matter to me
Mm.
don't matter as much anymore. And I have a lot of self-compassion and self-awareness and self-forgiveness around this, because
Mm.
if I went back to those dynamics, no matter how loyal they were, no matter how great of friends they were, no matter how tight a family I felt like they were, the
Mm.
reality is it would be me going backwards.
Mm.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
can't do that. I'd rather stand strong within me
Mm.
and
Yeah.
maybe inspire them to take that journey themselves,
Mm.
you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
than I'd rather stay home crying, more miserable, than go spend a night
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
people that are
Yeah.
bringing me to a level
Mm.
that I don't want to be at anymore.
No.
Because it creates this inner turmoil
Mm.
and this inner tornado where you're constantly, getting pulled back into where you were.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah.
And, part of the breath framework is reclaiming your power, right? So that's our,
Yeah.
and this really is reclaiming your power.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
standing up into yourself, having enough self-awareness, enough self-confidence, enough self-belief, enough
Mm.
self-love to
Mm.
put your well-being first
Mm.
is very
Yeah.
important.
And I love how you said that, Michael, about, standing standing up inside yourself and reclaiming your power. Now, if we look at that and we see that the word power, the definition of power is the ability to define. So when we give somebody some of our power away, when we give our power away to somebody else, we are allowing them to define us.
Yes.
Whether it's in a given a very short space of time or whether it's in a relationship. I'm teaching this to my children.
Yep.
They're 10 and 13 years old. And I'm saying, well, what do you want to do about it? Because right now, you have given your power away to that person and you're not making a free choice. And so it really is that, isn't it? It's like, okay, so what am I, and once you see that, you like, I can only speak again for myself, but I started seeing it everywhere. Like, it, like low levels, you know, quite subtle, but it's there. And it's all, you know, different, you know, like all the different transactions that you have, different interactions with different people, and you see it there, you see it happening between kids, between adults, in couples, between friends, and it's like, wow, you know, and you know, so it's like reclaiming it, and it's constant, isn't it? It's every single day, you know, and doing it, and I had to learn, and I'm still learning how to do it with grace, and doing it in such a way, you know, without being confrontational, and doing it with a smile.
Yes, I mean, it's really with boundaries, Deborah. I mean, that's just what we're speaking of now. That's everything of what boundaries is about, of really, you know, standing up for ourselves, reclaiming our power, you know, speaking up, and boundaries to be clear and for them just to be concise, but they can also, of course, they can be kind. You know, we can still speak of them and be kind to each other and communicate them. But really protecting our energy is the boundaries. And I think there is, when we look at burnout, I mean, boundaries are there with our friendships, our relationships at work, you know, they're mentally, their time management, they are spiritually, physically, everything within boundaries. And it's just exactly like you're saying now, the more you start to set them for yourself and become aware of them, and really respect them, and truly love them, because it's a relationship with ourselves as well. You can see it so much clearly with everyone else, where perhaps they're lacking boundaries or they're testing your boundaries. And that's an interesting one. It's really lessons in every day.
Well, this is where we have to pronounce the word abuse, because in fact, you know, you have low level abusive relationships everywhere. And it's really, I'm talking like low level, but you can see it. And it's like, oh, okay, you know, and then is it okay, you know, and then you can make a conscious decision, because you have to choose your battles. You can't be fighting 24/7, and you can't do everything all in one go. And so, okay, so what am I no longer going to stand for? What do I allow? What do I not allow? And then take it bit by bit. I mean, it's an ongoing, I mean, it's not, it doesn't happen overnight, right?
It is. And even with this, you know, it's something I often speak of with my clients as well, with boundaries, is understanding, you know, there's a lot of guilt that can come when we're starting to set boundaries and when we're starting to speak up, and we're so worried about what is the other person going to say, what are they going to think, what if they don't like it, everything. And it's really looking at what I explained to them is, you know, this person could be reacting on what you're saying because they have no boundaries of their own. They've never been taught boundaries. They don't have any of their own, and they are not they're not present when listening to you when you're speaking your boundaries. So even, take the guilt away, because it really has nothing to do with ourselves. We're putting that control on someone else when we don't know what their history is or what their reaction is going to be. And it really doesn't matter, because that is not, that is not in concise with what we are speaking of.
Yeah.
And it's really to just remind ourselves, I think, of this is that person has nothing to do with feeling or speaking of your boundaries, because it might be the case that they actually don't have any of their own, and they have never been taught what boundaries are.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, Rebecca, about redefining your boundaries, and
Mm,
that does take, yeah, it takes time. It takes
yeah,
self-awareness, and
yeah,
also like you were saying, the first reaction is, oh my God, what am I gonna lose?
mm,
Um, what's the price? What
yeah,
other people gonna think? How am I
yeah,
gonna do it? What are the repercussions going to be? And all that is like
mm,
vibrational frequency of the space of fear.
yeah.
So
Oh
guilt,
yeah.
shame, anxiety, criticism, judgment, fear of all the rejection, all these things.
Mm,
So long as we're operating from that space of fear,
mm,
we cannot truly, for our own selves, genuinely and authentically redefine our boundaries and create them in our in our new reality, create our reality. And so we need to find that way to move out of that space of fear and into courage, because it takes a
mm.
lot of courage to do that. And
It
yeah,
does.
there's some bad days,
Yeah,
there's some good days when, like Mike said, you're on top of the world, you can do
mm,
anything. So you go
yeah,
ahead and you define five boundaries, and then the next day
yeah,
you just "Ugh,"
yeah, yeah.
then you just hunker
It's
down for a few days.
Yeah, and it's baby steps. I say that, start small,
Mm-hmm.
build that confidence, and then move forward with other boundaries. But yeah, we have to start small and just, you know, um, take it step by step. Mm,
Yeah, it's for okay. So you guys worded it as boundaries. I worded it as dynamic shifts, right? When
mm,
a dynamic shifts in any type of relationship, whether it's boundaries, whether it's people are evolving and changing, whether it's one's devolving, going the wrong direction, whatever it is, I look at it as just dynamics, plain and simple, just how the interaction
mhm,
is.
yeah,
There's always an awkward period, right? There's always that I'm going to flip a switch and everything's going to change, and the other person has to adapt. And if they don't adapt, then it's their fault, right?
mm,
And that's where clear communication comes in.
yeah,
And I feel like there's not enough clear communication, right? Because the reality is, when we make boundaries, if we aren't expressing that to the other person, then we're doing them a disservice also, because
mm,
we're not being transparent with them to be able to adjust to them and give them a fair
mm,
opportunity, and explaining to them why we're doing it for ourselves.
yeah,
They might not like it, but if they
Mm-hmm.
respect you and care about you and love you, then they'll respect it.
mm,
But if it's not expressed and you expect the other side to read your mind,
Mm.
then you're setting yourself up for this big clusterfuck.
yeah.
Like, just
Oh
complete shit show. And
Mm-hmm.
it turns into this chaotic mess,
mm,
to where it doesn't matter who or what it is, doesn't matter if it's family, doesn't matter if it's a friendship, doesn't even matter if it's your child. It
mm,
doesn't matter if you're not clearly expressing what's going on. Like, I had to sit down with my son and explain to him why he's
mm,
going to camp all summer. Because one, he doesn't like change, and two, he'd rather stay home on his iPad all day than
yeah.
go to camp. But I
Mm,
had to explain to him why.
mm,
And once I expressed to him that I need you to go these days, this hours, this is why. He came back
mm,
and said, "Well, I'm not going to do that," even though he's 9. And he explained to me why. and he wanted 2 days to himself at home without his siblings here. And I said, that's fine. You expressed it. He explained it. I was able to change and work with it. You know, but that's where clear communication is so important in our life. And I feel like there just isn't enough of it. I used to do things and expect people to read my mind and know what I wanted them to know. That's not the way the world works. And I own that, right? If I don't express things clearly, I own that part. And I will do whatever I can to hold myself accountable and be accountable to whoever it impacts. But again, I'm done escaping things today, right? I'm back in a healthy space. I'm back holding my own space. I'm back in a place where I come first. And then I'm able to reflect outward on how to help others to the most efficient, effective way possible. And that's where my center is. That's where my safe space, my holy space, my space of premium effectiveness, right? Or optimal effectiveness. And that's also when my communication is clear. And there's certain people that I have in my life and used to have in my life and used to consider friends that I don't anymore, that didn't understand why I needed to explain myself at times. Because I don't like doing things without an explanation. I like the other person to know clearly why I do what I do. That way it's transparent, nothing gets held back, and there's no room for error with it. And I know we're going to have to cut it a little bit early in a couple minutes, and I do apologize for that. But I do think that we should do this once a month. I would love to do these conversations once a month.
They're so important, you know, such important conversations, and you know, just having the conversations where we're helping others as well to move forward and to go into spaces that they previously would never go to, and you know, all in the light of healing and you know, shedding everything, this baggage that we've been carrying. The baggage of trauma, the baggage of a million things, right? And ultimately, we each have to do it for ourselves. No one else is going to do it for you.
It lies with ourselves.
Yes.
And it's exactly that. You know, we're born alone, and we live with ourselves every single day, whether we like it or not. So and for me on the having, you know, as a recoverer from burnout, I just realised just how disconnected I was from myself. So busy spending the 45 years of my life, the first 45, seeking external validation, seeking approval from others. Oh, is it okay? Can I do it like this? Meeting people's expectations, making sure that I wasn't upsetting anybody. Making sure that I was fitting in everybody else's worldview of how they saw me. And it's like, and that's, Michael, you talked about the burnout wall. So when I hit that, I'm like, holy moly. Okay, so hang on a minute, what is going on? Wow. And when you realize that actually, you know, I realized that I wasn't being authentic with myself.
And just like you're saying, no, sorry, go on. No, I was just gonna echo what you were saying there with carrying all, you know, with our baggage, but really it's been, you know, the coping mechanisms and strategies that we've carried and learned our whole lives, you know, childhood, everything that has happened there, carrying that into, you know, young adolescence, into adult life with our careers. And the years have been flying by, and many of us, I know for myself, you know, it was like turn on autopilot, laser focused, can't see anything else going on in the world. I'm doing this. Michael was saying workaholic, you know, before, and that, you know, my world, I know, had to be turned upside down really for me to even wake up and realize what I was doing to myself. I mean, talk about energy and draining, and just not respecting myself. No self love there. No self care. Um, just thinking, okay, this is life. I'm just going to carry down this path, and everything will sort itself out. Just completely disconnected, as you mentioned, Deborah, and I can relate to that big time. That healing and the journey we're on now has really been a life lesson with everything, and a complete life change, which I'm grateful for today. It was difficult, being in those dark times. I can still, still have days where, like we said, something comes up, or it's a shadow work. Something's gone on into my life, or a new environment situation. But I know how to handle that now. I can recognize it. I see it for what it is. And it switches to like the curiosity and kindness now, because I can lean into it instead of just running away and backing off from it.
Yeah. And there's so much intention, what you just shared, Rebecca, and then we just learn to bring intention, at every moment in our day with every interaction. I
Oh
just
yeah.
feel so much more intentional,
Mm,
starting from the word go in the morning
yeah.
till when I go to sleep, and I feel just so much more intentional. And yeah, I mean that's the biggest gift that we can give to ourselves.
Well,
Yeah.
I hate to do this, but I have to cut this off. I need a potty
Yeah.
break before my next thing.
Okay,
But Deborah, make sure you speak to Rebecca about being on your show.
I will,
All right,
Rebecca.
and I
Well,
will reach and I'll reach out to both of you about what day to do this again every month. Okay.
Yes, I'd love to. Love to.
All right. Speak soon, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Bye.
much. Bye bye.